Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're diving headfirst into Blender. You know, that incredible free and open source 3D software.
Yeah, it's quite something.
We've got a really fascinating collection of material to explore. Everything from a beginner-friendly YouTube tutorial by Blender Guru, the official story of Blender's origins.
Articles digging into its impact on movies, its community.
Right, and a peek at what's planned for its future, games built with it, and even, how you can build a career with Blender skills.
So the goal today is basically to get a really good handle on what Blender is, where it came from, why it's such a big deal in so many creative fields, and where it looks like it's heading next.
Exactly. And whether you're completely new to this whole 3D thing, or maybe you're already in digital arts, but just curious about Blender's wider influence.
We're going to try and unpack the key bits for you, without getting totally bogged down in the super technical stuff. Just give you a clear picture.
Okay, let's start unpacking that. So first up, what exactly is Blender?
Well, according to that Blender Guru tutorial we looked at, which is great for beginners, by the way.
Yeah, seems really helpful.
They describe it as open source 3D software. It can handle, pretty much anything 3D. Animations, visual effects for movies, assets for video games, you name it.
The whole shebang, basically. And the really crucial point they make is that it's completely free.
And always will be. That's fundamental to what Blender is.
That free part is huge, isn't it? It's not just about saving money.
No, not at all. It fundamentally changed things. Because anyone could get their hands on it, this massive community grew up around it.
Right. Contributing ideas, code.
Exactly. Pushing it forward in ways that, traditional paid software maybe couldn't match at the time.
And that Career Karma article we read reinforces this, calling it open source, highlighting how versatile it is. Design, video editing, VFX, animation.
Even engineering, they mention.
Yeah.
And they also point out its connections with big open source groups like the Linux Foundation and the Academy Software Foundation.
Which adds a lot of credibility, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Shows it's serious tech.
Definitely. In that Career Karma piece, it really hammers home just how much Blender packs in. It's not just modeling.
No, it's like a whole suite. They mentioned motion tracking.
So following movement in video.
Using Python scripting to automate things, tools for game design, even sound design features.
It really sounds like a proper digital creation powerhouse.
And then you've got the itch.io page. Coming from the game dev angle. They just describe it simply as a free, open source 3D creation suite for the entire pipeline.
From start to finish, basically.
Yeah. So across the board, tutorials, career sites, game platforms, the message is clear. Blender is this comprehensive, freely available tool.
And what's really interesting is how that core idea, being free and open source, has shaped its whole journey. It's not just about being cheap.
No, it's about access.
Right. Access for everyone, building that community, and just a totally different way of making and sharing software.
Absolutely. And to really get how Blender became what it is, we kind of need to rewind, go back to the start.
The Garage Farm article gives some good context there. It says it started way back 1995 as an in-house tool for a Dutch animation studio, NeoGeo.
NeoGeo, right. And the person behind it was Ton Roosendaal. That name keeps popping up everywhere, including Blender's own history page.
Yeah, he's central to the story. The official history actually says he started writing the first code in January '94.
Oh, even earlier.
Yeah. And a bit of trivia, the name Blender, apparently it comes from a song by a Swiss band called Yellow.
Oh, really? That's kind of cool.
But the main driver, according to Garage Farm, was practical. They were frustrated with how hard it was to make client changes easily.
So they needed a more flexible tool for their own studio work.
Exactly, just solving their own problem at NeoGeo.
Okay, so born from a real need. Then fast forward a bit to 1998. Roosendaal starts a company around it called Not a Number. NAN.
Yep, NAN. And the Blender history page talks about their goal. Make and distribute this compact cross-platform 3D app for free.
Which was pretty radical back then, right? When pro 3D software cost a fortune.
Oh, totally. Thousands of dollars, easily. NAN's idea was to offer commercial services around Blender, but keep the software itself free.
Smart. And their first big public outing was SIGGRAPH in '99.
That's what the history says. And apparently, it generated a ton of interest. Showed it had real potential beyond just being an in-house tool.
And that interest led to investment.
So it did. About $4.5 million in early 2000. The Blender history mentions this allowed NAN to grow really fast, maybe 50 employees or so.
Wow. And that summer, Blender 2.0 came out, including a game engine.
Yeah, big step. Integrated game engine right in there. And by the end of 2000, they had something like over 250,000 registered users.
Sounds like they were on top of the world.
It looked that way, but you know how it goes in tech sometimes? Big plans meet market reality.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. Despite the buzz, NAND ran into business problems and had to shut down in early 2002, which also meant Blender development was going to stop.
Oh man, that's rough after all that progress.
But here's where the story gets really good, I think. Ton Roosendaal, seeing this passionate community that had formed.
Didn't want to let it die.
Exactly. He started a nonprofit, the Blender Foundation, in March 2002. The whole point was to keep Blender going, but as an open source project this time.
Okay, so a different model. And how did they manage that?
The community rallied, they launched the Free Blender campaign. The goal was to raise 100,000 euros to buy the source code rights from NAND's investors.
100,000 euros. That's a lot, especially back then.
It was, but incredibly, they did it in just 7 weeks.
Wow, 7 weeks. That's amazing community power.
Isn't it? And so on October 13th, 2002, Blender was officially released under the GNU GPL license, open source.
That date must be pretty significant for Blender users.
Absolutely. It cemented Blender's future, community-driven, developed out in the open, a real turning point.
So it went from in-house tool to ambitious startup, faced failure, but then found its true identity as this free open source project powered by its users. Okay, that's the origin. Now let's talk about what happened after that, the key milestones, the impact.
Right. Well, the Blender history page itself lists a whole timeline of versions, from 1.00 back in 94 right up to big revamps like 2.8 in 2019.
And that Blender in Film article really stresses how vital that initial free release in the early 2000s was.
Yeah, because professional software was just so expensive then. Blender became this lifeline for students, independent artists, anyone without a big budget.
And that crowdfunding campaign, as the article points out, was pretty groundbreaking. Happened before Kickstarter and all that was even a thing.
Totally ahead of its time in that sense.
And the foundation didn't just, release the code and walk away. They had this developing by doing phase, around 2006 to 2011.
Yeah, the Blender in Film article mentions that. That's when they started making the Blender open movies, like Elephant's Dream first.
And then the really famous one, Big Buck Bunny.
Exactly. Big Buck Bunny especially was huge, reached way beyond just the Blender crowd and really showed people what it could do.
And these weren't just demos, were they? They actually used making these films to improve Blender itself.
Precisely. They pushed the software, find limitations, develop new tools or workflows for the movie, and then those improvements got folded back into Blender for everyone.
That's a clever development model.
It really is. Then came another big step, the Cycles render engine. Around 2011, Blender 2.61.
Right, the Blender in Film article highlights that too. Made it more ready for professional production.
Yeah, it brought in high quality, physically accurate rendering, made things look much more realistic, which was crucial for competing with the big commercial renderers.
And they kept pushing. Tears of Steel in 2012. That was live action, right? Using Blender for VFX.
Yep. Showcase things like camera tracking, compositing, blending live footage with CG elements.
Yeah.
Really important stuff for film work.
And by 2014, it was used on an Oscar-nominated film, Song of the Sea.
That's right. And then maybe the biggest validation moment, 2015, Pixar announced they were actually using Blender internally.
Pixar. Wow. That must have sent ripples through the industry. Hollywood taking notice.
Huge signal. Then, the Blender in Film article really points to the 2019 release, Blender 2.8, as another massive leap.
What was so special about 2.8?
A totally revamped user interface, which was a long-standing point of critique for many.
Making it easier to use, basically.
Much more intuitive, especially for people coming from other software. Plus, the Eevee real-time render engine.
Eevee, what's that?
Think of it like getting a really good preview, almost final quality, instantly right in your viewport while you work. Big speed up for artists.
Okay, could see how that would be appealing.
And just general performance improvements. All this made Blender 2.8 a really viable alternative to the expensive stuff. You started seeing major studios adopt it.
Like Ubisoft Animation, Kara, Inc.,
Yeah.
the Evangelion studio.
Yeah. It really cemented Blender's place in the professional pipeline. It wasn't just for hobbyists anymore.
Okay, so a long road, but steady progress and some key breakthroughs. Now, we've mentioned the community a few times, but let's dig into that. The Garage Farm article calls them the lifeblood of Blender.
And that feels pretty accurate. It's not just people using the software, they're actively building it.
How so?
Well, through testing new versions, giving crucial feedback to the developers, creating their own add-ons and plugins to add features.
And donations, right. The development fund, Blender Cloud subscription.
Exactly. Those are vital for funding the core development team at the Blender Foundation and the Blender Institute, which, by the way, was set up back in 2007 to handle these projects and training.
And it's not just individuals contributing, as companies are involved too.
Right. That Garage Farm article mentions companies like themselves. They're a render farm that supports Blender and contributes to the fund, and places like Blender Market.
An online store for Blender stuff.
Yeah, assets, add-ons, and they donate a portion of their profits. And Sketchfab, the 3D model platform, is a major sponsor too.
So it's a whole ecosystem.
It really is a positive feedback loop. The community and supporting companies help Blender grow, and Blender empowers them in return.
And then the Garage Farm piece also says even just using those supporting services helps Blender if you can't donate directly.
Yeah, or just spreading the word, participating in forums, helping other users. It all contributes to that lifeblood.
Speaking of showing Blender off,
Yeah.
those open movies we mentioned earlier, they're pretty iconic.
Definitely. Blender Studio lists them all, starting with Elephant's Dream back in '06, through Big Book Bunny, Sintel, Tears of Steel, and more recent ones like Spring, Sprite Fright, Charge.
And these are more than just cool shorts, right? They serve a purpose.
Yeah, R&D in action, basically. They stress test Blender in real production, drive development based on the needs of the film, and then...
They release everything. Models, textures, all the files.
Yep, all under open licenses. It's an incredible learning resource for anyone wanting to see how a professional project is put together in Blender.
That's amazing. And it's not just these official projects anymore. Even tiny bits are sneaking into mainstream stuff. Like that Blender Guru tutorial mentioning his donut.
Yeah. The donut tutorial is legendary for beginners, and apparently a little donut animation based on it showed up in Everything Everywhere All at Once.
That's pretty funny. Shows Blender's reach is getting wider and wider.
It really is. No longer just a niche thing. And another huge area is games.
Right, that itch.io page, the number was staggering. Over 13,000 games listed as made with Blender when we checked.
Yeah, 13,000. It just shows how capable it is for game development too, creating models, animations.
Textures, rigging,
Yeah,
the whole asset pipeline.
exactly. From tiny indie projects to some pretty ambitious looking games, all built using free software, it really opens doors for aspiring game developers.
Okay, so it's great for film, great for games, but the big question for many listeners might be, can you actually make a living with Blender skills?
And the Career Karma article tackles that head on. Their answer is basically a resounding yes.
Why are the skills in demand?
Well, precisely because Blender is free and so powerful and versatile, companies can use it without huge software licensing costs, and it can do so much.
Makes sense. What kind of job areas did they highlight?
Things like design and animation, obviously, but also video game scripting, user interface design,
And they listed specific job titles too, didn't they? Lead animator, VR game designer.
VFX artist, 3D programmer, mobile app developer, 3D animator, video editor, architectural designer.
Character designer, game artist, 3D artist, sound designer, concept designer. The list goes on. Freelance artist, graphic designer.
Yeah, it's a really broad range. Shows how many different paths you can take with Blender skills, and they included average salaries and outlooks too, though obviously that data is from when the article was published.
Still gives you a good idea.
Yeah.
And they didn't just list jobs, they gave some advice on how to build that career.
Right, a sort of roadmap, get educated, really learn one, Blender inside out, build a strong portfolio of your own projects.
Get involved in the community we talked about.
And then, start applying for those jobs. It's practical advice.
So Blender isn't just a tool, it's a potential career path. A serious one. Okay, so that's the present. What about the future? Where's Blender heading?
Well, that blender.org post about plans for 2025 gives us some clues. The big themes seem to be stability, documentation. They have this Winter of Quality project focused on that.
Always good to have a stable foundation.
Definitely. And then new projects across different areas, like node systems,
What are you doing with nodes?
trying to make them work better together across different parts of Blender, like materials and compositing, more unified. And a big one, getting the new geometry nodes hair system up to feature parity with the old particle hair.
So making the modern way of doing hair just as capable as the old way. That'll be huge for character artists.
Should be. And then for production tools, they're looking at making things easier for studios. Things like project setup for managing project-wide settings,
Online remote assets for accessing libraries online easily.
and simplified overrides, all aimed at smoothing out production workflows.
Performance improvements too.
Yep, faster shader compilation for EVE, the real-time engine, and optimizing how shape keys are stored, which is good news for animation performance.
And sculpting's getting some love.
Looks like it. Fixing some technical issues with detail propagation, adding sculpting layers for more non-destructive work.
Oh, layers would be nice, like in Photoshop, but for sculpting.
Kind of, yeah. More flexibility. And improving tablet support, starting with touch input.
And for filmmakers, they mentioned story tools in the video editor.
Yeah, for storyboarding and basic camera editing inspired by a popular add-on. Could streamline the pre-production process right inside Blender.
Sounds like a lot of solid improvements across the board.
It does. And they mention ongoing work too, on rendering with cycles and NPR, non-photorealistic rendering, Vulkan support for graphics.
UV improvements, HDR support, better animation layering, more compatibility with formats like USD and GLTF, and looking ahead towards Blender 5.0 eventually.
It's a packed roadmap. And they even laid out the release schedule for 2025. 4.4 in March, focused on stability. 4.5 LTS, the long-term support version, in July.
And then Blender 5.0, starting the next big cycle in November. Plus the conference is moving to September. Busy year.
Definitely looks like it. Shows they're committed to pushing forward, improving stability, and adding features the community needs.
So as we wrap this up, it's just kind of amazing, isn't it? Thinking about Blender's journey.
It really is. From that little in-house tool back in the 90s.
To this global open source force impacting movies, games, design, everything.
And all driven by that passionate community. It's quite a story.
Absolutely. And the key thing still is that accessibility.
Yeah.
It's free. It keeps getting better. It offers so much opportunity.
Yeah, whether you're just curious or a total pro, there's something there for you.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? If you've ever had even a tiny spark of interest in creating 3D worlds, Blender's just sitting there waiting.
Totally free to download and try.
Maybe now's the time. Head over to blender.org, check out that beginner tutorial, maybe watch one of the open movies or look at some games made with it. Makes you wonder, doesn't it? What kind of 3D world might you create?